Cassian didn't expect to be ambushed tonight. He was wounded. To save himself, the young man had to crawl away from his carriage a little to the side. No one must know that he escaped. There was the sound of footsteps. A girl in high heels approached him. "I beg you to help me," Cassian asked the girl. She bowed low and held out her hand to him. "You want to live, don't you?" asked the girl, taking a seat in front of Cassian. "If so, give me your word that you will protect my little sister, even at the cost of your own life. Her name is Alice Valentine. That is the only way this child will not follow in my footsteps." A few days before these events, Eva sat on the floor and tried to understand what had really happened. She had absolutely no idea where she was now. This room was unfamiliar to her. There were people in the room. Eva did not know them either. A stern elderly woman rudely counted out the golden-haired girl. She was crying loudly and trembling. "I'm probably dead again," Eve decided to herself. She was not happy about that fact. Eve carefully felt her body. There were no wounds, her clothes were intact, and there was no blood anywhere. The last thing Eva remembered were people with long knives. They were shouting loudly and threatening her. Most likely, this strict woman beat up the owner of this body first. She fainted, so I moved into her. Now it's the golden-haired girl's turn. Eve concluded. "Ouch!" the girl with golden hair exclaimed loudly. The whistle of the whip was heard again. "Alice, roll up your sleeves. And I taught you that a real lady doesn't yell." The stern woman grabbed the girl's arm. "Why are you being so stubborn? There are only 5 strokes left. Be patient for a while. Kindly accept the punishment with dignity." "Okay, Nanny." The girl had already accepted her fate. Eve was tired of watching what was happening. She rose slowly from the floor and tried to leave unnoticed. "I see you're awake now." The nanny turned to Eve. "I want to take the punishment instead of Alice." Eva spoke up defiantly. She was tired of watching a young girl get beaten. Eva felt frankly sorry for her. Eva had died and been reborn in a new body several times already, so she was absolutely not afraid of pain and death. "My dear sister," Alice exclaimed. "So why are you standing there and doing nothing? I'm the big sister. It's my decision. I'm willing to take any beating." Eva turned to the nanny. "Wow, what a strong sisterly bond you two have. How silly and wonderful at the same time." Admiringly, and at the same time snidely, Nanny spoke up. She hooked her long, strong fingers firmly into Eva's chin. "Okay, that's enough for today," said the nanny and let go of the girl's face. She really hoped that the sisters would not give her any more reason to resort to punishment. "Your behavior makes me very unhappy. I hope you'll come to your senses and not do it again. Now rest," Nanny ordered the girls. As soon as the door slammed behind the nanny, Alice sat down on the floor and cried bitterly. "Okay, I am no longer Margarita. I am in a new body. Now I have a new life to live. I am reborn again." Eva summarized tonight's events. In one of her past lives, the girl's name was Inga. One evening, she decided to pop out to the store for a beer, but she was hit by a truck at a crosswalk. When the girl woke up, she found herself in a novel. It was her first rebirth. In that novel, she was very strong. In the fights, she had no equal. The girl tried with all her might to make it to the end of the novel. She thought that at the end of the story, she would return to her old body. She would continue living her old life. But the girl wasn't so lucky. Once again, she was hit by a truck at a crosswalk. When Eve opened her eyes again, she found herself in a new body. This novel was about magical duels. People everywhere fought with swords. In this novella, Eve had to fight all the time. She was trying to understand the basics of magic almost around the clock. The second rebirth was even worse than the first. When Eve first got to the battlefield, she was shaking like a bunny. But still, the girl was determined to go through this novel to the end. She had to survive this time. In her new body, Eve practiced for hours. She had to learn how to wield a sword perfectly. Without this skill, she would not be able to survive on the battlefield. But unfortunately, All her efforts were in vain. In one of the battles, he was surrounded by enemies. She tried to run away from them, but tripped and hit her head on a rock. Death was instantaneous. The third time Eva was reborn into the body of Margarita Bernardo. But unfortunately, in this novel, the heroine turned out to be pathetic and weak. Eva is used to stronger characters. The only plus point of the novella was that there was a strong love line. Eva looked out the window. She had to get used to a new body and new circumstances. She hoped that this novel would be better than the previous one. In a previous life, Eve was held captive. Every day there was an exact copy of the previous day. It was pitch black all around. Eve didn't realize how much time had passed, didn't know what time it was. If truth be told, Eve didn't like her previous rebirth. It was worse than all the previous ones. In the last novel, the girl died protecting the protagonist. He was flawed and obsessed with her. The girl didn't want to die for the protagonist, but Stockholm Syndrome kicked in. Eva went out into the garden. As much as she doesn't want to, it's still worth living this life. Fortunately, finding herself in a new novel, Eva knows its title and approximate plot in advance. When the girl gets into someone else's body, the character's memories come to her. In this novel, the main character was Alice Valentine. Eva was a secondary character. She was Alice's half-sister, a stain on the Duke's reputation. Eve was lucky enough to be an illegitimate and unwanted child. In the plot of this novel, Eva was jealous of her younger sister Alice. In the end, the girl is brutally killed by the protagonist. Surprisingly, I'm not the protagonist this time, and my role is pretty mediocre. Eve didn't like the fact that this time she had been reborn as an infantile villain who should be retiring soon. Maybe I'll be lucky enough to live a quiet, peaceful life this time, Eva thought to herself as she reached out her hand for the huge rose. The flower was beautiful. Having experienced 4 rebirths, Eve had learned several lessons. First, one should never hurt the small and weak. Second, one should never let others take advantage of oneself. Third, one should take care of one's family. Most importantly, it was necessary to get rid of any obstacles. In this novel, the main obstacle was the nanny. Her name was Ketty. She was the one who, according to the story, would be putting the main character in the way. Eve had to think of a way to get rid of the nanny. Eve saw her sister Alice in the garden. She was also admiring the roses. Alice also noticed Eve and hurried over to say hello to her. I wonder what kind of relationship she and I have at the moment. Why is Alice shy when she talks to me? Eve thought to herself. In the plot of the novella, Eva ignored her sister most of the time. They hardly ever spoke to each other. At this point, Eve had not yet managed to do any harm to her sister. Dear sister, I want to apologize if I have offended you. I also want to thank you for yesterday. It felt good that you stood up for me, Alice said, and handed Eva a bouquet of flowers. Thank you, they're very pretty. Since the protagonist had no bad intentions, Eva decided to keep the bouquet. I've wanted to tell you for a long time that you're very pretty. Eva decided to connect with her sister. You must be flattering me. I'm not as beautiful as you and our father, and my hair isn't Snow White either, Alice exclaimed, embarrassed and blushing. There was horror in Alice's eyes. The nanny once again brought the rod over the girl. Leo entered the room. The girl threw herself into his arms. From the girl's mutterings, Leo realized that Alice's house was inhabited by a woman who had been beating young ladies from the Count's family for a long time. She had been executed a few years ago. Leo pulled the girls tightly against him. He realized that her obsession with babysitting would play into his hands. Alice desperately sought protection. She thought Leo would be able to help her. Eve dreamed again of Alice's body pressed against Leo's. The girl was very attached to the guy. In the future, it would play a cruel joke on her. Eve reached out and touched Alice's head. Sister, I don't want to live like this, sobbing bitter tears, Alice said. Eva jumped up on the bed. The girl didn't understand why she had this dream almost every night. Although her sympathy for her sister seemed rather strange, she was worried about her. When a person begins to feel sorry for someone, he strives with all his heart to help. Eva had to eat breakfast in the company of Alice. This moment annoyed the girl a lot. If Alice continued to be constantly near Eva, it would be impossible to forget about a quiet and peaceful life. Nanny appeared next to Alice. She asked the girl not to make any noise during the tea party. Eve froze in place. She didn't hear any sounds. Alice drank her tea rather quietly. Apparently, the nanny had just decided to pick on something. She wanted to make a scandal again. "I apologize," said Eva and set the cup on the table. Alice jumped up from her seat and started apologizing to the babysitter. "You made a mistake, and now you will be punished!" The nanny grabbed Alice's hand and pulled the girl toward the window. Humbly lowering her head before her nanny Alice held out her hands to her, Eva threw the cup to the floor. There was the sound of shattering china. Shards and spatters of hot tea flew in every direction. Alice and Nanny turned at the sound. "Eva, what have you done?" Nanny asked fearfully. "And what did I do?" Eve asked her with a certain sneer in her voice. Nanny clutched the cane tightly in her hand and walked toward Eve with a firm step. Nanny grabbed the girl's chin with a sharp motion. "How dare you show such insolence?" screamed Nanny. "How this reminds me of my first day in this novella." Eve thought to herself and pulled her nanny's hand away from her face. "What do you think you're doing?" the nanny exclaimed fearfully. It was the first time she had been rebuffed. She was used to being as a threat. The two sisters were just ordinary victims to her, and that had always been the order of the day. "I've been raising you for 13 years now. You came to me as a 6-year-old child. I've put a tremendous amount of effort into raising you, and now you're acting like this." The nanny was outraged. Ketty slapped Eve in the face with all her might. She ordered the girl not to touch her. Eve didn't react to the blow in any way. She had long been accustomed to feeling pain. She had been beaten often in her previous lives. Eva pushed the nanny away from her. She lost her balance and collapsed to the floor. "Oh, aren't you hurt?" Eva asked in a sweet, plaintive voice. The girl stepped on the babysitter's rod, and it crisply broke into 2 pieces. "Well, why would you do something so stupid? There's no telling what a decision like that will lead to," Eva thought to herself as she went back to her room. Although the girl blamed herself for such behavior, she realized that she had acted instinctively. Eve was annoyed that the nanny thought she was a god, a goddess of destiny. Such people had to be put in their place immediately. It was useless to explain anything to them. Eve looked at her hand. It retained the strength of the previous heroines. She felt it when she grabbed Nanny's forearm. "Sister!" Eve heard Alice's voice. "Why didn't you go to your room?" inquired Eve from the girl. "I want to talk to you. Promise me you'll never do that again." Eva stared at her sister in surprise. She didn't understand why she was asking. "If you think I enjoy fighting with the babysitter, you are sorely mistaken. I simply had no other choice. Remember, I'm not going to become everyone's benefactor. I'm not going to save you all the time." Eve muttered a little irritably. "Eva, you have an abrasion on your face. I know you wanted to help, but was it worth it? Now your face isn't perfect." "You got so worked up over some scratch?" Eva inquired of her sister. "You're so kind and sweet." Eva stroked her sister's face. The short story said that the main character had a soft personality, but Alice didn't expect it to be that soft. Sometimes Alice was like soft and crumbly tofu cheese. "How about we have lunch together?" Alice asked her sister. Eva agreed to her proposal. She wanted to connect with her sister. Now she had the opportunity to do so. A blonde-haired young man appeared in the hallway. Alice called him brother. Standing in front of the girls was the Duke's eldest son, Damien Valentine. Alice threw her arms around her brother. "I've missed you so much. Have you resolved all your affairs in the North after all and decided to come home?" Alice inquired excitedly. Damien turned toward Eva as well. To Alice, he was a sibling, but to Eve, he was a half-brother. Even though they looked very similar, that didn't make them family. To Damien, Eva was the daughter of the woman who had ruined his mother. "How are you doing?" Eva decided to ask her brother. After all, he hadn't been home for weeks on end. I'm doing fine. How are you doing? You saw something on your face. Her brother answered her. Alice touched her abrasion. She told her brother that it was no big deal. She had just accidentally bumped herself. There was no need to worry about it. In the story, Eve had already been reprimanded by Damien for being rude to the nanny. Ketty had a goal of tarnishing Eve's reputation and making herself look like a caring and loving nanny. It usually worked. Try to be more careful next time, asked the girl's brother. Ava was uncomfortable talking to her brother. She realized he didn't like her, so she hurriedly excused herself and left. When she entered her room, Ava collapsed on her bed. The day had just begun, and she was already tired. This rebirth was wearing the girl out emotionally. And then there was Damien. His relationship with Eva was strained. Eva is an illegitimate child who should never have been born. Her mother was a maid to whom the Duke had a very warm regard. She took advantage of the couple's trust and poisoned their drinks. The Duchess's glass was laced with sleeping pills. The Duke's glass was poisoned with a hallucinogen. As a result, the man mistook his maid for his wife. They spent the night together. The maid then fled the castle under the cover of night, taking the secret with her. A few years later, when Alice was 4 years old, the maid returned to the castle and told the Duke the whole truth. The Duke could not forgive the maid he trusted. He drew his sword and cut off her head. Fortunately, he kept Eva alive. His wife had asked him to do so. The Duchess promised that she would raise the maid's child as her own. The Duke had no choice but to enter Eva in the family register at his wife's insistence. A few months later, due to severe emotional stress, the Duchess became ill. When Eva and Alice were 6 years old, the Duchess passed away. Even though Damien understood that children were not to blame for the sins of their parents, he still disliked Eve. Understanding and feeling were completely different things. The Duke did not pay proper attention to his daughters. When he saw them, he immediately remembered the story of his maid and his wife. In order not to suffer, he avoided his sisters. Eva realized that now she was unlikely to be able to get rid of Ketty. Damien had always sided with the nanny. The girl was also unsettled by her power. She suddenly realized that there was a glow left inside her, an energy that filled her entire body. It was exactly how she had felt during her second rebirth. But how was that possible? The power that Eve cultivated in her second rebirth has appeared in this world. Will she be able to control it? After being reborn, Ava always became a different character, but retained all the memories of her past lives. No matter how strong she was in the previous novel, in the new story, everything started from scratch. If the power passed from one rebirth to another, she would not be captured in the third world. Ava decided not to use her power yet, as her body was quite weak. She would not intentionally demonstrate her abilities to others. The only thing she knew for sure was that when a person was strong, life was much better. Suddenly, Ava started coughing violently. Blood came out of her mouth. It's been a long time since she's been like this. In the world of noble mages, if you overworked yourself, your mouth would bleed. It was also a bad feeling if the hero was very frightened. Most likely the blood came from emotional exhaustion. First, Ava was having a hard time accepting her new self. And second, she was very nervous when she had a fight with the nanny. Eve decided to make a plan. As soon as the girl gained her power, she immediately thought about how she could frame Ketty. It would be foolish to suddenly turn into a murderer. Somehow, she had to get Damien to fire the nanny. It's imperative that Damien witnesses another beating. I don't think he'd leave the nanny to work after that. Eva invited the maid to her room. She asked her to prepare a bath for her. The maid was surprised at the request. After all, when Mistress is in class with Ketty, she is not allowed to take a bath. Marie, this time I want you to be the one to help me take a bath. I think I should get used to taking a bath the same way other aristocrats do. They enlist the help of servants, asked the girl Eva. Marie didn't want to help Mistress with the water procedures. The thing is, she could see the wounds and abrasions on my lady's body. The The servants were obliged to report such things to the Duke and his son. If they find out that the nanny is beating up the sisters, there could be trouble. Even if Ketty gets away with it, she never lets witnesses go without punishment. Ketty has forbidden me to be present when you take your bath. I need to ask her permission first, and you probably shouldn't be taking a bath right now. If Nanny finds out about it, you'll be in for a rough ride, Marie warned. Okay, then we'll do it another way, Eva said, and began to pull down her dress. Marie screamed loudly and covered her face with her hands. Eve took her hands away from the maid's face and ordered her to look at her. Look how deep the wounds on my shoulders are. Do you realize that this is your fault too? Eve asked the girl. How much longer are you going to keep quiet and pretend nothing's going on? Admit it. You're getting paid by Ketty to keep quiet, aren't you? You've been working here for over 7 years, haven't you? Do you enjoy watching us get beaten up? All these years, you're the reason my body has been growing scars. Your silence and greed created them. Are you proud of yourself now? Eva grabbed the servant by the neck. My lady, I beg you, let me go. I can't breathe, Marie whimpered in a strangled voice. Now, how am I supposed to forgive you? Eve inquired of the girl. Marie promised that from now on she would do whatever Eva told her to do, as long as she didn't touch her again. After these words, Eva let the girl go. That's great news. You owe your life not only to Ketty, but to the entire Valentine family. Do everything I ask and you'll be fine. Eve suddenly grabbed the maid by the shoulders. Eva admired the starry sky. She'd finally figured out how to get rid of the nanny. Now she had Marie, who had served Ketty for 7 years, as her ally. The nanny probably doesn't expect a blow from this side. Dear sister, it's so good to see you, Alice exclaimed, swinging the doors open for Eve. Eve knew that the loneliest hours for Alice were the time before her class with Ketty. She hides, hiding her anxiety and fear of what will happen next. Before class, Alice drinks tea constantly, trying to forget herself. Alice, if I remember correctly, you're afraid of the dark. It stresses you out so much that you avoid narrow and dark corners, Eve said thoughtfully. Eve walked over to the dressing room and swung it open. Did you really decide to borrow my dress? Alice exclaimed excitedly. What? A dress? Oh, yeah. Lend me a couple, please. Eva didn't immediately realize what her sister was talking about. She had slightly different plans for the dressing room. I'll pick out the prettiest dresses for you now, said Alice and walked into the dressing room. Once the girl was in the dressing room, Eve closed the doors tightly. Alice began to panic. She was pulling on the doorknobs, screaming hysterically. I'll open the doors when class is over. Sit here quietly for now. You be sure to wait for me and promise not to cry. Trust me, and everything will be fine, replied Eva to her sister. According to the plot of the novel, after the episodes of Alice's beatings were revealed, the Duke and his son stopped leaving the castle. They realized that during their absence, Alice was being hurt. They promised that it would not happen again. Once her family starts caring for Alice, she will return the favor. It was to Eva's advantage for Alice to spend more time with her family. Then she would leave the girl alone. Eve would not have to communicate with Alice. Her life would be more peaceful and quiet. Marie, I hope you remember what I asked you to do, clarified Eva to the maid as soon as they reached the door. The girl replied that everything would be fulfilled. With a sharp swing of the door, the nanny burst into the room. Eva drank her tea quietly, paying no attention to the nanny. Lady Eve, why is there only a lass here? Where's Lady Alice now? Nanny wondered. Hello, Alice isn't feeling well, so she won't be able to attend today's class. Eve answered in a calm voice. But it's never happened before, Nanny exclaimed. There's a first time for everything in this life. Eva smiled happily. Ketty was beginning to get annoyed with the situation. She could no longer look at Eva's smirking face. The nanny involuntarily clenched her hands into fists. Lady Eva, I have absolutely no idea why you are trying to drag me into your play. Stop your pointless persistence. No matter how hard you try to win Lady Alice's heart, you will never be a real family. If Eve hadn't been reborn into this body, and the real Lady Valentine was still here, she would have burst into tears. But unfortunately for Ketty, there was a completely different girl sitting across from her. One that was already doubting whether she remembered or what her real name sounded like. Of course I'm not her own sister. Then what do you want from me? You see, as of late, I can't keep my mouth shut. I'm a fake sister and I should be kicked out of here, and you're going to jail for hurting Alice. How does that sound? Oh, you're trash! Know your place! You're complaining about me! No one will believe you! Ketty boiled with anger and slapped Eve across the face. You just punched me right in the face! What do you intend to do next? Eva spoke in a quiet voice. That rule only works with Lady Alice. No one is going to worry about you. That's not the only abrasion on your face, so why hasn't anyone asked about it until now? Nanny exclaimed angrily. You're just a maid's daughter. Remember, no one wants you. You're not really Alice's sister, just a mixed-blood fake. Oh, really? Let's check it out, shall we? Eve exclaimed excitedly. Ketty was stunned for a moment. It was the first time she had ever seen such insolence. Eva swung her hand and knocked the tea set off the table. How embarrassing, Eva mumbled with a frightened look. What do you think, Nanny? What will happen if I do this? Eva picked up a cup shard from the floor and clutched it tightly in her hand. Knobs of blood ran down the girl's wrist. Suddenly, Eve shrieked and crouched on the floor. Eva heard someone's footsteps. Someone was walking confidently toward the classroom. A gloating smile appeared on the girl's face. Lady Eve, you're out of your mind! Frightened, Ketty exclaimed and took a few steps back. This girl was frightening her. Damien walked into the room. Eva, I was told that you locked Alice in the dressing room, said Damien. The girl made an innocent face and touched her injured arm. Damien's eyes flashed with anger. He wondered what was happening in this room right now. Ketty, explain what happened. Damien turned to the nanny. Things are not at all as they might at first appear, and I don't know anything at all about why Eve locked Alice out of the dressing room, screamed Ketty, falling to her knees in front of Damien. Lady Eve cut her hand on purpose with the splinter, and the abrasion on her face is because she slipped on spilled tea and hit her cheek on the table. Ketty sobbed bitterly. To Damien, Ketty was a person who had earned a good name for herself through years of hard work and perseverance. Eva, on the other hand, was a bone stuck in her throat. At this point, it was up to Damien. Eve had to accept the situation and trust in his judgment. Eva, Damien began to say. Sister, I found you after all. Alice burst into the room. Alice threw herself into Eve's arms with a sprint. Eva couldn't keep her balance, and they fell on the couch. My girls, are you all right? Are you hurt? Ketty decided to play the part of the caring nanny. Come quickly to me! I'll give you a big hug! Nanny continued to shout. Alice noticed the wound on Eva's arm. The girl cried bitterly. She blamed herself for what had happened. Damien approached the girls. He asked Alice if what the nanny had told him was true. He asked Alice if it was true what the nanny had told him. Alice stood silent, her body trembling. Eve understood. Alice had been beaten for a long time. It had negatively affected her psyche. Just the name Ketty alone put the girl in a stupor. It was unlikely that she would be able to tell the truth. Ketty was aware of Alice's depressed state, so she began to play the caring nanny again. Alice, if you don't want to, then don't say anything. There's no need to overstep your bounds, said Eve, touching her sister. My sweet brother, it's all lies. My sister and I have been beaten by the nanny for a long time. Eva just wants to protect me. It's not her fault. For years now, Nanny has been abusing us. I still have the frames from her blows, Alice said in a firm voice. Lady Alice, why are you lying? Mr. Damien, none of this is true. Ketty began to protest. No, I'm not fooling anyone right now. I'm sorry for keeping quiet for so long. I was just afraid of you. And today, my sister got hurt to protect me. It's all my fault, shouted Alice loudly. With a scream, Alice passed out. Just like in the original novel, the girl was constantly fainting due to intense emotional distress. Damien, which side do you think the truth is on? Which one are you going to believe? Eva asked her brother. Finally, Eve's efforts bore fruit. Damien ordered Ketty to be captured. Lady Eva, be sure to visit me. I have something I want to tell you. You'll be very sorry if you don't come, shouted Ketty as the guards led her out of the classroom. Damien took Eve's hand and suggested that she call a doctor. If the wound was deep, it might be inflamed. I have antiseptic in my room. I'll treat the wound and dress it. There's no need to call a doctor. I'm tired and terribly sleepy. Please pay more attention to Alice than to me. She has been under a great deal of stress just recently. Eva spoke in a tired voice. I'm sorry. Eve heard Damien's voice. She knew what he meant. He was apologizing for not believing the girl right away, for doubting her words. Already in the hallway, Marie caught up with the girl. I apologize that there was a slight hitch. Having summoned the young master as you ordered, I returned to Lady Alice. She asked me to open the door for her, threatening otherwise to jump out of the window. With her head bowed low, Marie told the story. Okay, I believe you. You're free to go, so you can go. Eva was surprised that Alice threatened to throw herself out the window. Such boldness she hadn't expected from her mumbly sister. After dressing all her wounds and abrasions, Eva collapsed exhaustedly on the bed. She felt wildly tired again. Today had drained her of all her juices. But whatever it was, the girl decided to live this novel to the end. Rebirth is like a game of roulette. Its spins are unpredictable. In this life, Eva was lucky enough to be a supporting character, with a pretty face and a rich family. There's no telling whose body she'll end up in next time. The first time a girl found herself in the body of a schoolgirl, it wasn't much of a problem. If she had been thrown into the second or third rebirth, it would have been hell. In the plot of the novel, Eva only occasionally interacted with her maid, Marie. She had no strong family ties. In fact, no one in the castle cared about her. In this novel, Eva doesn't have to pretend not to be discovered by her relatives. In her previous lives, Eva always had to pretend, so that relatives and acquaintances would not suspect anything. She had to play someone else's role all the time. Sometimes she had to play the energetic person, at other times the brave heroine or the quiet one. Who is Eve at this point in her life? What does she really want? The answers to these questions are long forgotten. Eva was getting too good at getting into roles. However, no matter how perfectly she was cast, something always slipped from her sight. Playing the roles of other characters, Eva strove with all her heart to love them. She also constantly wanted to be loved. No matter how much Eva tried, the character's family in the novel could not replace her real, loving family. Eve woke up to someone calling her name loudly. When she opened her eyes, she saw Alice in front of her. "Dear sister, you have a fever! We must get a doctor as soon as possible!" Alice exclaimed loudly. "Please don't leave me alone!" Eva grabbed Alice's hand. The heat made the girl's mind go blank. She felt like both Eva and Marguerite at the same time. "Alice, why did you do that? Why did you run out of the dressing room and come to me? Where did you get the strength to press charges against Ketty?" Eve began to ask questions. "It's simple. You're my sister. You've always protected me, kept me safe from harm. And I wanted to protect you, too. Yes, I was scared, but I knew you were there for me. From that day on, I decided to be brave." Eva lay down on the bed and cried bitterly. For the first time, she felt like an idiot. Alice rushed to comfort her sister. In the original story, she was very different. While she was in her right mind, she was always a crybaby and a weakling. She was a character who did not fill her head with nonsense, but was a humble victim. In this world, Alice went beyond her character. Firstly, she threatened to throw herself out of the window, and secondly, she stood up for her sister. Most likely, it was Eve who helped her to change, showing her an example by her behavior. Eva clutched her sister tightly to her. She was glad that the girl had managed to change, that she had broken out of the cage of her image. Eva wanted to protect her from further problems and hardships. She would always be by her sister's side. The next day, Ava was ashamed that she had let her feelings out. She had never cried in front of anyone before. Ava took out a piece of paper and began to make a plan. Ava decided that she would be the main character in this novel. She would not let Alice follow in her footsteps. In the original story, Leo and Alice met in the Carter family funeral parlor. That day, the young man first showed interest in the girl. Later, they crossed paths several more times. The young man was madly in love with Alice. After his father's death, Leo took his place, becoming Duke at a very young age. Leo was obsessed with Alice. This crush was unhealthy. According to the plot of the novel, Alice was burdened by his feelings, but she was afraid to refuse. The Carter family was very powerful. After a while, Leo began to masterfully exploit Alice's weaknesses and shortcomings. He manipulated her through her psychological trauma, relationships within her family, and political stance. At the end of the book, Leo crushed the Valentine family. The family was wiped out, with only one person left alive. That was Alice. Leo had plunged her into an abyss of loneliness and made her his forever. Maybe I should stop Leo and Alice from meeting? Although that's hardly going to help. There'll still be a hunting competition and a coming-of-age ceremony at the funeral. They'll definitely meet there. Eve reasoned aloud. The funeral was a couple months away, so no need to delay. Should we get rid of one of the main characters? No romance novel without a male protagonist. Should we try to kill him off? That's a bad idea, though. With my current body, finding and killing Leo will be extremely problematic. And even if I succeed, the consequences could be terrible. Basically, if I think back to the past, I'll just die and be resurrected in the new world. Maybe I shouldn't worry about that. What if we don't kill him, but take his magic power? Another option would be to have someone other than Leo inherit the title. That way he loses his main weapon, power, and a toothless tiger is unlikely to be able to capture its prey. Leo had a half-brother. His name was Cassian Carter. It was at his funeral that Alice and Leo met. In the novel, he was the villain who was killed first. In the plot of the book, Leo attempted to assassinate his brother, but he survived. He escaped and dreamed of revenge, but was still killed at Leo's hands. At the time of his pseudo-funeral, Cassian was still alive. After a failed assassination attempt, the coffin was without a body. It is not known when Cassian actually died, but his end was miserable. He didn't even have a grave. To ally with Cassian, I must meet him before the assassination attempt. If he starts hiding afterward, I won't be able to find him. Eve concluded after much thought. Eva hid behind a tree that grew near the cliff. It was today that Cassian's carriage would overturn at that spot. A coachman approached the girl. He asked her to get into the carriage. He had to go home, as the road was extremely dangerous at night. He cursed himself for not taking a couple of nights with him. Don't worry. Everything will be fine. No one will dare to attack us. The girl tried to calm the coachman. The fact was that the Valentine family had been famous for their fighting skills for many generations, including the girls. According to the memories of the body mistress, Alice and Eve are skilled in sword and battle tactics. In case of danger, Eva will be able to fight back. I won't be here for long. I'll just admire the view for a while and we'll head home, said Alice to the coachman. Shots rang out somewhere not far away. The girl realized it was almost time. Half an hour had passed and still no Cassian's carriage. Something's gone wrong. Novella can't cheat. The girl approached her carriage. The coachman was rubbing the wheels with great care. Hey, what are you doing? The girl crouched sharply next to the man. The man howled in fright. Eve tensed her index finger, and a blue lightning bolt erupted from it. The stunned coachman fell to the ground. I happen to know how to wield lightning. That's very good, Eve muttered, looking at her finger. Eve looked toward the cliff again. The Carter family's coachman ran past. He must have jumped off before the carriage went off the cliff. In the story, it was the coachman who caused the wreck. He was supposed to kill Cassian, who was in the carriage. Cassian had no luck in life. He had no mother, no money, and no magic. He was born into a family that valued magical skills. He didn't know how to use them. Even Duke Carter himself was ashamed of his son, and there was no one who would side with the lad. Duchess Carter and her son Leo often plotted against Cassian. They wanted to kill him to strengthen their position in the succession. Since the coachman had already fled, Eve needed to carefully climb down the cliff and find Cassian's body. The girl walked over to the wounded guy. As the carriage began to fall, the horse bucked violently, one of the axles on the wheel coming off. Cassian saw the coachman's look of horror. The carriage flew down the cliff. Only the coachman escaped. Could it be happening again? Cassian managed to get out of the carriage. He walked a few steps and fell to the ground, his strength draining away. The boy realized this accident was no accident. His brother and stepmother were trying to kill him again. In the beginning, they tried to push him down the stairs. The guy managed to survive, but he broke his leg. Afterward, his brother and stepmother plotted to drown him. But the boy was lucky again. He survived. The people in the manor kept their mouths shut, though every one of them was well aware of how the relatives treated Cassian. The servants simply turned away and covered their ears. If you had any powers, you could fight back against your enemies. That's what his father used to say to Cassian. Sometimes he felt like he wanted to get rid of him. His son was a burden to him. Cassian was reserved. He didn't trust anyone on his estate. He was always waiting for some kind of trick from others and a stab in the back. Sometimes Cassian was even afraid to eat, and he felt as if poison had been added to the food. Is this really the end? The relatives got their way after all. They managed to kill me. But I really want to live. I've spent a lot of energy to survive. I've turned out to be so pathetic that I don't even have anyone to mourn me. Cassian felt sorry for himself. Cassian heard footsteps. Someone was walking slowly toward him. "Help me, please. I really want to survive." Cassian pleaded for help. The girl ran up to her coachman. She needed help. The girl told the coachman that she had found a wounded young man near the cliff. He needed to be taken with her to get some treatment. The coachman put Cassian on his back and carried him toward the carriage. After the coachman had carefully laid Cassian down in the carriage, Ava asked him not to tell anyone what had happened. This information was better kept secret. Ava brought Cassian to the hotel. There, she treated the boy's wounds and bandaged them. The Carter family had a unique characteristic. Their eyes were bright red in color. Eva covered the young man's eyes with bandages so that no one would pay attention to him. The hotel hostess, Madame Bianca, comes to Eva's room. She is an important character in the novel. In the story, she is the leader of an imperial secret society. Nothing is impossible if your inquiry interests her. She will find any items and information from all over the world. Also, according to the plot of the novel, Leo often visited her. Bianca liked the young man. Ava decided that such an ally could come in handy. She wanted to do business with this woman in the future. "Why did you decide to choose our hotel in particular?" Bianca inquired. "I need your assistance on a very important matter." Eve answered her briefly. "I would do anything for you except kill you," Bianca replied to the girl. "I need a magical item that can be used to change my appearance. Can you get it for me?" Eva asked. "To be honest, I've never heard of such an artifact. I don't think it exists at all. The only thing is there's a small magical item that changes hair and eye color. I can sell it to you at a special price." "A change in hair and eye color is already a good thing. I agree. I'll buy it from you. Also, I would like to ask that you find one person for me." Eve spoke thoughtfully. Ava entered Cassian's room. It smelled strongly of blood and medicine. The girl removed the blindfold from the young man's eyes. He slept very soundly and didn't even wake up from her touch. Eva sat down across from Cassian's bed. Suddenly, the boy opened his eyes. The first thing he saw in front of him was a young girl with long blonde hair. "How are you feeling?" Eve asked the young man. "And who are you?" "My name is Eva." The girl introduced herself briefly. "I congratulate you on surviving a terrible accident." Eva leaned over Cassian. "How are you feeling?" The girl repeated her question. Cassian sat up abruptly on the bed. He winced in pain. The young man's entire body ached. It seemed like there was not a single healthy spot on his body. Why are you jumping up so abruptly? You shouldn't be making sudden movements right now. The girl held out her hand to Cassian. Don't touch me! Shouted the young man and recoiled to the side. He's a strange one. The guy must have hurt his head in the fall. He looks so scared and nervous. There's obviously something wrong with his psyche. Ava thought sympathetically. Answer me. What is this place? Where am I? Cassian asked the girl. You have eyes the color of gold. Are you from the Valentine family? Eve was surprised at his guesswork. Cassian didn't look like a man who'd lost his memory. You're absolutely right, the girl answered him. Why aren't you telling me what this place is and how I ended up here? You're the one who brought me here? Why did you lock me in this room? Cassian no longer looked like the boy who had crawled on the ground and begged for help. You fell off a cliff and I found you and saved you, Eve replied to the young man. In the original novel, Cassian was always characterized by his shrewdness. He never changed his principles because he could not survive otherwise. He was always alone and surrounded by enemies. Cassian won't even open his heart to the one who saved his life. It's a shame you don't remember anything. I personally nursed you back to health, gave you bandages, Eva said in an aggrieved voice. And why would you do that? Cassian inquired. I won't hide anything. I need you. I need you to be the one to inherit the title of Duke, not your brother Leo, Eva admitted. If you'll be on my side, I'll make a Duke of you. This is ridiculous and absurd. That girl is talking some nonsense. Why does the illegitimate daughter of Duke Valentine need me? The young man thought to himself. Cassian had never thought about becoming a duke. He thought it was impossible. The only thing Cassian wanted was to survive. It seemed to the young man that if he survived against the intrigues of his relatives, it would be the perfect revenge. Are you trying to use me for some purpose of your own? It seemed to Cassian that Eve was pulling him into some kind of trap. Why do you want to make me a duke? Do you want to bring discord into the Carter family? It's worth noting that you have a wonderful imagination. But no, you're wrong. I need you for an entirely different purpose. I propose you become a duke, and it's up to you to decide whether or not we're on the same path. I think the conversation can end here, said Eva, rising from her seat. I'll give you some time to think about it. I want to hear back from you tomorrow. Cassian covered his face with his hands. He had absolutely no idea what to do in this situation. What was he living for? Is there any point in becoming a duke? Eve saw Cassian's dark silhouette through the window. He was limping a little, trying to get as far away from the inn as possible. As soon as Ava let the young man think over his proposal until tomorrow, even then the thought slipped into her mind that Cassian would try to escape. She looked too suspicious in his eyes. He should have left this place at all costs. Since the girl knew Cassian would run away, she left him a cloak to help hide his face. Okay, I'll play hide and seek with you, but only a little later. Right now I want to get some rest. I'm too tired from all this, mumbled the girl with a sly smile. Cassian was afraid to confide in Eva Valentine as well. He was betrayed by people close to him all the time. The maid he trusted had put poison in his tea. A neglected servant was pushed down the stairs. He was even abandoned by his own father. Cassian was afraid that Eve would use him and then throw him away like a tired toy. The young man promised himself that he would definitely thank the girl for saving him just a little later. Cassian froze in the middle of the square. He realized that he had nowhere to go. No one was waiting for him at home. Hey, who are you anyway? What are you wandering around for? Two young boys appeared next to the young man. They had an aggressive attitude. Don't hide your face. You don't have to turn your back on us, the skinny guy shouted. Cassian heard the smell of alcohol. The two men were drunk out of their minds. How much longer are you going to play the silent game? The skinny guy shouted, grabbing Cassian by the shoulder. Oh, come on, you can see this guy's about to cry, said the skinny one's partner. You're wrong. I'm just in a big hurry, so please be so kind as to let me go. Cassian tried to remove the skinny man's hands from his shoulder. Judging by his tone, our lad is a real aristocrat. Loudly, the skinny man laughed. Where has it ever been seen that a noblewoman wanders the streets alone? Have you lost your way? His partner inquired. You don't have to be afraid. We have fun here. There's even one golden rule. Give all your money to the poor. The thin man exclaimed. I'm telling you again, leave me alone and go on your way. Cassian grabbed the skinny man's arm. He howled in pain. You hear me? Let go of my friend quickly! Shouted the skinny man's partner and swung his fist to hit Cassian. Cassian managed to dodge. He should have left the square as soon as possible. He didn't want to get into a fight. What's the matter? No sooner had I escaped than I immediately fell into the hands of bullies, Eva said with a cheerful grin. The girl was watching from the roof of a neighboring house. So, are you going to beg me for help again? Cassian asked the girl. She's definitely the monster from that legend. She has a unique charm that she uses to subdue people and eat them alive. Cassian thought to himself. Hey, sis, what are you standing there for? Come on down to our place. Let's have some fun with you, shouted the skinny one to Eve. Look, how about I slap you twice in the face and your friend will come down to us right away, suggested the skinny man to Cassian. Eva continued to watch from the roof of the house. Cassian silently endured the humiliation. He gave absolutely no retaliation to anyone. Eve decided to come to Cassian's rescue. She quickly descended to the ground with the grace of a cat. I'll save you this time too, you just try not to forget it, said Eva to Cassian. The young man froze in place. He absolutely did not understand how Eva managed to descend from the roof to the ground in a second. It was like sorcery. The girl spun around as if in a dance. She suddenly appeared in front of the skinny man and punched him in the face with all her might. I thought so. This body is weaker than it was in the second rebirth. Eve thought to herself as she looked at the reddened hand. There was nothing surprising about that. In her second rebirth, she had the blood of man and God in her veins. Her power was beyond what she was used to. This same body belonged to a pampered lady. The bullies grabbed sticks and ran toward Eve. The girl folded the fan and hit the first bully who ran up with it in the face. The second one she punched sharply in the stomach with her fist. A few minutes later, almost all of the bullies were defeated. Who the hell are you anyway? Where did you learn how to do that? If I had known you were that strong, I would have asked for help right away, Cassian said admiringly. Eve remembered the plot of the novella. In the book, Cassian had tried to use Alice to get rid of Leo, but after a while, he fell in love with her, so he backed off. That poor young man couldn't even get his revenge. In fact, he was killed twice in his own family. Eve picked up a stick and walked over to Cassian. Eve put the sharp end of the stick to the young man's throat. She asked him to choose between dying here and now or taking her side. Are you trying to kill me? Cassian asked. You know about my plan. That's why I can't let you go so easily. I won't kill you myself, and I'll just nullify the whole treatment, drag you back to the foot of the mountain. I'm sure the instigator of this spectacle will take care of the rest. Eve answered him. Cassian knew if his relatives saw that he had survived the fall, they would simply finish him off. Wait, how do you know it wasn't an accident? What makes you sure it was faked? Cassian asked the girl. Eva guessed that Cassian would ask her about it someday. The girl had already made up a plausible story. Eva said that she saw the coachman running and that he seemed suspicious. She went to the cliff and noticed Cassian's wounded body below. The girl decided to help him. She was an illegitimate child like him. I also have another reason. Only it won't seem plausible to you. If I tell it to you, you won't believe me. Promise me you'll listen to me, even if the story seems silly. Eva asked Cassian. I want to know the truth. There is already too much deception in my life. The young man answered her. Eva told Cassian that she and her sister had been beaten by the nanny for a long time. One day the woman had overdone it, and Eva had fainted from the pain. She had a terrible dream that was very much like a prophetic dream. I dreamed that in the not-too-distant future, my beloved sister Alice would suffer because of her cursed brother Leo. In the dream, I felt nothing but emptiness and sorrow. I saw that you, like me, would soon die. End of story. Eva really hoped Cassian would believe her. "I'm sorry, I'm not sure I got it right, but that sounds absurd," replied Cassian to the girl. If he didn't believe in the dream, he'll take the story of the novels and rebirth as nonsense. Eve thought sadly to herself. Suddenly Cassian cried bitterly. He was saddened by the fact that he was dying even in this strange girl's dream. "I've told you everything. I've answered all your questions. Now answer me. What have you decided?" asked Eve, leaning over to the young man. "I can make a vow to you. I, Eva Valentine, swear to do everything I can to make Cassian live a long and happy life. If I break this vow, then I shall die the most horrible of deaths." The girl raised her left hand in the air. "Now it's your turn to speak," said Eve. "If your words are true, then I accept your offer." Bowing low, Cassian spoke. "I don't know how you will do it, but I want to be a duke. If I am to die, I leave the choice of what it will be up to me." Suddenly, Cassian collapsed exhaustedly on the girl's chest. Eva didn't want to believe that the young man was about to die. She had already put a lot of effort and energy into saving him. She needed him to carry out her plan. Eva leaned over Cassian to give him CPR. The girl felt Cassian's heartbeat, his warm breath. The boy was alive. "And what would you have done without me? Various suspicious individuals come in here, of course. But you, with the bloody guy, would definitely not have been let in without my help," said Bianca. "I am very grateful for your help." Eve answered her with a sweet smile. "Madame came to the rescue so timely, as if she had been watching us. It's a miracle you showed up just as we approached the inn. I saw from the window that a man and a woman were approaching the building. I thought they needed help. I wasn't following you." In a calm voice, Bianca answered her. "I'd like to ask you one more favor," said Eva. "You've probably realized by now that I came here with Cassian Carter. I want to make him a duke. Therefore, I will need your help." "You want to go over the heir's head? There will be a lot of third-party action to realize this order," Bianca warned. Although Eva was an illegitimate child, and her relations with her family were rather cool, it did not mean that she was penniless. On the contrary, the girl was on an equal footing with Alice in material terms. "Don't worry, I'll take care of all the expenses," Eve answered her. "To make Cassian the heir, you will need me entirely," said Bianca. "I realize you're worried that our partnership will be rather lengthy, but I think you won't have to turn down any other orders." The girl reassured her. "I'm very interested in the order, but I think the amount is not small. Can you afford it?" Bianca asked. "I will pay for your order in installments, and if anything goes wrong, Cassian will give you the rest of the money." Eve answered her. "I'll be honest, your order is quite unusual. This is the first time I'll be doing something like this, so I suggest we take small steps. Perform one small action after another," said Bianca, raising a finger in the air. "By the way, did you find that man I asked you about?" Eva asked. "I've asked my confidant to investigate. There will be a result soon," Bianca answered her. Eva remembered that in the story of the novel, there was always one man beside Bianca. It was a man she trusted. His name was Logan. "I understand that Man and Cassian will need new identities. They will also need to change their appearance. Then they'll be able to be around you all the time." Bianca spoke thoughtfully. "As we have already agreed, I will be paid for my labor in diamonds." When Bianca left the room, Eva realized how tired she was. She went to the bed and lay down next to the sleeping Cassian. Eve had used up almost all of her magical power reserves. She needed to recover. The next morning, the girl took the first aid kit and sat down next to Cassian. The girl saw that the young man was not asleep, but was only pretending to be asleep. The girl took the ointment and pulled back the edge of the blanket. She needed to apply it to Cassian's wounds. Suddenly, the young man grabbed her arm. "Stop it! What are you doing?" Cassian jumped up on the bed. "I knew it. You were only pretending to be asleep," Eve exclaimed happily. "I need to examine your wounds." "You don't need to examine anything. Give me bandages and ointment. I'll do it myself," demanded Cassian from the girl. The girl noticed that Cassian's wounds were healing rather quickly. There was practically no trace of them left. In the novella, this is a sign that there was a sudden surge of mana. Most likely it wasn't blood that was flowing through Cassian's body, but magic mana. "Cassian, how many times do you think I've saved you?" Eve asked the young man. "I don't remember exactly, but I think 3 times. Cassian answered her. "I saved you twice. The 3rd time, you saved yourself. You survived because of the mana stored in your heart." After the 2nd rebirth, Eve began to see the mana in the hearts of the people around her. "Do you feel like there's something different about you?" the girl asked. She put her hand on the young man's chest. "I don't feel anything, and please take your hand off my chest," asked Eve Cassian. Eve stroked Cassian's back. She sensed that there were many blocks in his body that were obstructing the flow of mana. Somewhere it flowed weaker, somewhere stronger, but for the most part, the channel was blocked. Eve touched one of the major energy points on the young man's body. "I'll try to remove some blocks from your body," said Eve to the young man. Memories from a past life began to come to Eve. She had done something like this before. When Cassian's carriage crashed, Eva had climbed the mountain with the young man on her shoulder. To fool Leo, she used a blood trail, stretching it all the way to the river, faking a drowning. As Eve carried Cassian on her shoulder, she could feel the mana walking through his body. His slow breathing probably influenced her movement. Eve asked the young man to concentrate on his breathing. "I'm starting to feel something. Is it what I think it is?" Cassian asked. "Yes, we got what we wanted." "I can feel mana now? This is a power I've only heard of? Turns out it was in me all the time," Cassian exclaimed in surprise. In the original novel, after the assassination attempt, Cassian gained his powers and immediately fled. He didn't have time because Leo and his men would have arrived at the crash site at dawn. If he knew Cassian had awakened his mana, he would have killed him on the spot. Eve touched the young man's face. He kept everything to himself again, afraid to show his true emotions and feelings. "Congratulations, you are now in control of magic." With a soft smile on her face, Eve whispered, "This is the place right here." The coachman pointed with his hand to a small clearing in the middle of the cliff. Leo wondered how one could survive falling from such a height. His mother had taught Leo from childhood that it didn't matter how strong or powerful a person was. After all, some people died even from an ant bite. So if there is any threat, even the slightest one, it must be eliminated immediately. That's the only way to win. "Look at the carriage! I saw it fly off the cliff with my own eyes." The coachman remembered Cassian's eyes. At that moment, they blazed with anger. "Well, since you saw Cassian fall off the cliff, I have no choice but to kill you. You are now an unnecessary witness," Leo said to the coachman and ordered his guards to kill the servants. "Okay, one problem solved. Unnecessary witnesses we've eliminated," Leo said, rubbing his hair. We had to make sure Cassian was definitely dead. Next year, he would celebrate his majority. After that, he could fight for the title. Of course, he had no power or support, but it was still better to be safe. A threat is always a threat, no matter how big it is. Nothing and no one can be discounted. Even the smallest chance can work by chance. Did Cassian really manage to crawl to the river after the fall? Leo thought to himself as he looked at the bloody trail on the ground. Find the body at all costs. It will most likely be downstream. Leo ordered his guards. Eva handed Cassian a small envelope. It contained earrings that had magical powers. When a man put them on, he changed his appearance. The color of his eyes and hair became different. Eva also invented a new life for Cassian. The young man now had a new name. His name was Maxwell. Eve glanced at the boy who sat across from her. He certainly reminded her a lot of Cassian, but he looked completely different. Now the game could begin. A servant came to Damien and reported that his sister Eva had returned to the castle. She was perfectly safe and sound. Damien berated himself for hating her for a long time and blaming her for his mother's death. Even in the girl's most difficult moments, he had constantly turned his back on her. Now he was determined to change the situation completely. "Where is my sister Eva now?" Demian asked the servant. Your sister is in the guest room right now. The thing is, she didn't come back alone. A man came with her. The servant reported. Sister, you've finally come home, Alice exclaimed happily, peering into the guest room. I heard you were back, so I came to see you. And who's this? Alice pointed with her chin at Cassian lying on the bed. Damian walked into the room. It was their first meeting since the nanny incident. The girl could see that her brother was filled with guilt. That might have played into her hands. If you were pitied, it made sense to pretend to be even more pitiful. I'm sorry. I should have come to you right away. But that man needed to be seen by a doctor immediately, said Eva to Damian. The girl was worried that her brother would recognize Cassian. Why did you bring this man into the house? Damian asked. It's so confusing. I'm going to have to take a long time to explain it to you. I almost fell down a tall ladder, but this man saved me, and as a result, he was injured himself, Eva said in a humble voice. How awful! Are you all right yet? You didn't hurt anything? Alice asked fearfully. I'm fine. Don't worry about me, Eve reassured her sister. So you decided to thank this man in this way? Demian inquired. It was a man who fell down the stairs because of me and was seriously injured, so I decided to bring him here and give him some help. Luckily, Damian believed Eva. He even called a doctor to examine Cassian. After examining the young man, the doctor said that his body was covered with wounds and bruises, but there were no serious injuries. He should rest for a few days, and he will recover fully. Damian, I have one small favor to ask of you. I want to talk to you in private. Eva asked her brother. So we're alone in this room. What did you want to tell me? Demian asked his sister as they sat down at the coffee table. Damian, I saw that man rush to my rescue without sparing himself. That's why I want him as my personal bodyguard. Eve answered him. Eve noticed the surprise on Damian's face. He was understandable. His sister's savior had come out of nowhere. They didn't have to give him a job. Eva needed Cassian around her at all times. She couldn't think of any other way to keep him with her. I shouldn't think that this man is not familiar to me. We were good friends with him when we were children. After I came here, we often exchanged letters with him. Eva continued to tell her fictional story. I didn't know that. Damian thought about something. I never told anyone before that I was very lonely in the palace. No one wanted to be friends with me. You and Father are not comfortable being around me. I realize it's not your fault. Eva continued to press the pity point. I'm telling you this for a reason. This man has always been a dear friend of mine and has supported me in times of need. I always wanted to introduce him to my family. Our rare correspondence brightened my loneliness. After the incident with Ketty, I really wanted to see my old friend. I realized I missed Maxwell. I don't think those reasons would be enough to appoint this man as your bodyguard, replied Damian to the girl. You see, we are a family of knights. A great many people would like to work for us. The position of personal bodyguard is one of the most honorable. It's not a position where you can hire whoever you want. I realize I'm asking a lot, but for 13 years, Ketty bullied us. Maid Marie just stood by and watched it, and you, brother, knew nothing about it. Eve answered him. Maxwell, on the other hand, rushed to my rescue without a second thought. He saved an old acquaintance with whom I exchanged letters a couple times a year. He's the only one I can trust. He used to be a mercenary, so he has no problem with swordsmanship. Eva, I understand this has been difficult for you. I will grant your request, only I have one condition, said Damian. Mercenaries are not the same as trained knights. If he wants to be your bodyguard, he must pass an exam. I will personally choose his opponent. I'll give your friend time to recover. The bout will take place in 2 months. Do you agree to that condition? You're as sensible as ever, brother. Only now you'll have even more to worry about, Eva said with a smile. The girl realized that it would be difficult to realize the plan. Alice was also extremely curious about who her sister had brought into their home. This is an old friend of mine that I've never told anyone about before. His name is Maxwell. We met before I moved here. We've been corresponding ever since. And then by chance, we met again. Now I'm grateful to him for saving me." "That's so romantic," Alice marveled. "You and Maxwell must be very close? You know each other well? He must be more precious to you than me?" Alisu mused thoughtfully. "What a silly thing to say. I care for you very much. I would never blame you on anyone else." Eve was humbled by Alice's naivete. Her sister had no idea how much Eva wanted to save her, how much effort she puts into making sure she lives a long, happy life. Eva decided to meditate a little before going to bed. She needed to regain her strength. She needed to learn how to control this new body. She was not fully accustomed to it yet. The girl was to help Cassian reach his full potential. For the time being, she must protect the young man and thus become stronger than him. She had to pay special attention to his spiritual energy. For Cassian to win the title, more money and allies are needed. It is hard to find people without money, and without them, it is impossible to organize a coalition. In the original novel, all preparations were completed before the coming-of-age ceremony. Immediately after the event, Duke Carter's health deteriorated dramatically. The coming-of-age ceremony is the perfect opportunity. On this day, Cassian will demonstrate his power and declare himself heir. Eva remembered that Nanny had asked to visit her. I wondered what she wanted to tell her. The girl threw her cloak over herself and went to Ketty's. Eva went down to the basement of the castle. This was where the criminals were kept. Since Ketty's guilt had been proven, she was placed under house arrest. "Ketty, you're looking good. The prison air has done you good," Eve said as she approached the nanny's cell. "Lady Eva, you decided to come to me after all?" I could hear the joy in Nanny's voice. "Of course you wanted to tell me something. I'm keeping one big secret. It will overturn the duchy, overthrow the foundations of all high society." Nanny spoke ominously. "Is your secret really that terrible?" Eve wondered. "I will certainly narrate it, but you should let me go. As soon as I'm free, I'll tell you everything." "So no one knows this secret but you," Eve said thoughtfully. "I'm not deceiving you. I even have proof. Let me out and I'll tell you everything," the nanny pleaded. "I'll probably say no." Eva didn't remember there being anything like that in the original. "I don't want to know anything about your secret. Let the secret of which you alone are the keeper decay with you." Despite her nanny's arguments, it was dangerous for Eve to possess information that was not in the original source. "I suppose you didn't want to inform the Duke of the secret, so you decided to call me here specifically. I refuse to hear you out." "Don't do it! You're making a huge mistake! You will soon regret it bitterly!" shouted Nanny loudly. "Let it go. It's my choice," Eva said, and clamped her hand over the nanny's mouth. "As long as your heart is beating, you will not utter a sound." Eva connected her thumb and index finger on her right hand. A blue glow appeared at the base of her fingernails. Nanny's eyes widened with horror. Eva decided to visit Cassian as well. "Eva, are you hurt? You smell of blood," Cassian said excitedly. "You've got quite a sense of smell." "I'm fine. I was visiting my babysitter in the dungeon." In a calm voice, the girl answered him. "Did you go to see that woman who abused you for 13 years? You know, a few years ago, someone threw me down a flight of stairs. That person turned out to be my closest servant afterward. Since that day, I have had a fear of stairs. It's only recently that I've become more comfortable going down the steps. I hardly ever lean on the railing." Eva realized that the boy was trying to comfort her with his story. It was as if he was hinting that the babysitter story would soon be forgotten. It sounded really sweet. "So why did you decide to come to me?" Demian asked, overcome with embarrassment. "I came to report to you that I told my brother about you. I told him the story of our friendship, and then I asked him to make you my bodyguard. Unfortunately, things didn't go as smoothly as I wanted. They made one condition." "And what condition were you given?" Cassian asked. "You will need to prove your eligibility for the position. Brother has promised to choose an opponent who has been a member of the Order for less than 2 years. The duel will be held after your full recovery." Eve answered him. "Are you nervous about this?" the girl asked. "I'm certainly not thrilled to be in a duel, but I'll do my best. To be honest, I thought your plan was doomed to failure." Cassian answered her in a calm voice. "But since you have decided to carry out your plan, there is nothing left for me to do but obey you. My job is to give it my best." "Well, since you agree to everything, you deserve a reward. I've prepared a present for you. Here, read it at your leisure. Hide it so no one will see it." The girl handed Cassian the book. Cassian was surprised to read the title. The book was a guide to sorcery for dummies. It revealed how to use magic covertly in battle. Eva dreamed again of her third rebirth. She was back in Marguerite's body. The girl was again visited by her brother. He asked her not to try his patience anymore and not to try to run away. He was the highest clergyman in the empire, the head of the church, the world-famous messenger of God. It was Arian who was the main male character of the third novel. "Look into my eyes, my love," Arian asked Marguerite. Tears were pouring down the girl's cheeks. She wanted with all her might to escape from this man. Eve stepped out onto the balcony to recover from the terrible dream. Arian was a nightmare to her, the devil of hell. When she had been in Marguerite's body, she had been terrified of the man. Eva worried that gossip about Cassian would spread among the servants. But the palace was quiet. Demian had begun a large-scale inspection of the servants, so they had no time for idle chatter. Eve was lucky that, thanks to the commotion in the house, no one realized that Cassian and Maxwell were the same person. To think that Valentine's illegitimate daughter and the Carter family's greatest disgrace were now allies. "Dear sister, you must not be resting well. You look sleep-deprived and your eyes are red, but you are still very beautiful," said Alice, looking at Eva. "Never mind, it's just plain sleep deprivation," Eve answered her. "If you need any help, tell me right away. Poor sleep has a negative effect on your health. If you want, we can take a walk in the garden." Alice reminded Eve of an obliging little puppy. "Thank you, I really appreciate your concern," Eve replied to her. "Did you happen to hear anything about Ketty?" Alice asked unexpectedly. "Why did you decide to ask about her?" Eve inquired. "My personal maid told me that Nanny suddenly stopped talking. She can't utter a single word." Alice answered her. "That's how. That seems very strange. I wonder why she kept quiet," Eva asked with a smile. "The servants say that the nanny has stopped talking because of her shocked state. And strangest of all, when she's given a paper and pen during questioning, she refuses to write. They say Ketty looks very scared," narrated Alice. Also, Alice shared that once the head of the Valentine family returns to the palace, Ketty will be sentenced. She will most likely be executed. In the original novel, Eve was to be joined by a girl named Diana. She was Leo's loyal subject. She was the one Bianca was supposed to find. Marie came into the room. She said that the lady had a visitor. He brought the almanac she had ordered from the bookstore. "Sure, let her come in," Eve answered her. Ava knew that the words about the book were only a code. A man had come to the girl and brought her information. Bianca was dressed in blue-colored clothes, as always. Bianca laid several sheets of paper on the table in front of Ava. They were the reports of her informants. The girl delved deeper into the reading. The information concerned Diana. The documents listed not only the girl's strengths, but also her weaknesses. "Is that all the information?" I gave another request, Eva reminded. I was very surprised by this request. "I never thought you would be interested in it. I have prepared everything I could find. However, there are a couple things I won't know without your help." Bianca pulled another folder out of her bag. "Madame Bianca, last time I told you that I was going to make Cassian a duke. I also asked if you would agree to help me in exchange for future privileges. It's time for you to answer me directly." Ava demanded of Bianca an answer. "You know, it's not easy. As a businesswoman, I'm supposed to be neutral. And then a request comes in asking me to help one of the ruling noble families. It's really stressing me out. I want to think about it some more." Bianca answered her. "As a token of my favor to you, I will share one piece of information with you. Carter's funeral is coming up. It's scheduled for just before the end of the summer. As soon as I know the exact date, I'll let you know right away," Bianca said. Based on the original novel, it is on this day that Alice meets Leo. Bianca handed Ava 2 notes. In one, she asked the girl to put on a veil and go to the place indicated on the map. It was also necessary to buy a doll in the alley. In the second note, a map was drawn, and a cross on it marked the location. The note said that when the girl came to the place indicated on the map, the one who would help her fulfill the request would be waiting for her there. Bianca advised her to bring bodyguards with her. The girl wondered who this mysterious person was who would help her with her request. Finally, Eve and Cassian reached the location indicated in the note. A little girl appeared next to the girl with a basket in her hands. The girl held out a teddy bear to Eve. That's probably the toy the note was talking about, Eve thought to herself. Eva handed the girl a gold coin. She decided to buy back all the toys from the child. "You know, you surprised me now with your behavior. You usually seem very collected, not showing emotion unnecessarily. But now you've bought out all the toys, paying the girl a pretty hefty sum." Cassian admired the girl. "Don't think I'm rude and unfeeling. Sometimes even an iron lady like me can get frustrated." The girl answered him. Suddenly, Ava swung her fan sharply. An arrow fell on the sidewalk next to them. "Judging by the trajectory, it was fired from that tree," said Eve, turning toward the tall oak tree. "I wonder who was the archer's target, her or Cassian?" The girl did her best to cover the young man with her body. She asked him not to move a step away from her. "You're raring to go into battle again, with absolutely no thought for yourself," Cassian exclaimed. The girl once again swung her fan. Another arrow flew off to the side. Ava praised herself for going to the blacksmith before the sortie. He had made metal inserts in her fan. In her second rebirth, Eve was a master of the battle fan. She still loved that tool. Besides, this accessory didn't attract much attention, especially in the hands of a defenseless-looking girl. Judging from the number of arrows and the intervals between shots, they had one opponent. Since she hadn't noticed that they were being followed, it meant that the shooter had hid in the designated place beforehand. Who had found out about their outing today? The only person who knew about today's walk was Bianca. She knew for sure that Ava and Cassian would be trapped, so she had asked to bring a bodyguard with her. "Come out! I'm not afraid of you!" Eva shouted loudly. She was ready to face her adversary. In front of the girl, a man in a black cloak jumped to the ground from a tree. The man's face was covered by a mask. He silently drew his sword. The man in the black cloak was determined to attack.